Govan, a few minutes ago, about 10 minutes ago, we saw a few incidents of stone throwing between those two groups. One imagines that the tensions are so heightened in that area, what with the build-up and mobilization that has been happening, but also with the large-scale police deployment. What can you tell us about the situation at the moment? Does it seem that the situation will continue to hold as it is and will get through the day without any serious outbreaks of violence?
That's certainly what the police are hoping to achieve, Tulasizwe, but the rock throwing has further antagonized the situation and really raised the tensions here. But I think let's get a clearer view of what exactly is happening here. I'm joined by one of the protesters. He's asked to speak Afrikaans. We'll allow that. And meneer, you can say you want to make it clear about why you're here and what we're seeing here today. Hoekom het u besluit om tot hier voor te kom waar die EFF se protest is?
Ons het verlede week het ons nou toe gekom net om te wys ons staan saam met die plaasmoorde. Ons staan saam teen die plaasmoorde. En verlede week is van ons mense in hegtenis geneem om redelik gedink het ons is gewelddadig. En nou vandag vra ek nou weer wie se gewelddadig is. Ons het ons het nog nie een klip teen hulle gegooi nie, ons het niks gedoen nie. Ons is hier vir die boere en vir die gemeenskap, vir die mense wat vermoor word in ons land. Ons soek net bietjie, ons soek justice. Ons soek regte justice. Ons soek nie net 'n ou wat in die tronk gaan sit en ons belastingbetalers se geld opvreet nie. Ons soek 'n ou wat gaan boet vir sy sonde.
As julle hier vir konfrontasie?
Nee, ons is nie hier nie. Ons is nie hier om met hulle te baklei nie. Ons is nie hierdie manne dink ons is hier vir wit en swart. Ons is nie hier vir wit en swart nie. Ons almal het die reg om in hierdie land te bly soos elke liewe een. Ek is hier gebore, ek is 'n Suid-Afrikaner, ek is 91 gebore. Ek is hier gebore, hier sal ek bly. As dit moet wees, dat ek nou maar hier moet sterf, dan sal ek hier sterf.
Ek sien baie van die manne wat hier het, of 'n paar van hulle het gewere. Hoekom is dit belangrik om die gewere te bring hier na toe?
Ek weet nie hoe met hulle gewere saamgebring jy. Wag nie, skiet al defend jy jouself nie. Dis hoe belaglik ons wet is. So ek voel net dis belaglik. Jy kan maar eerder die gewere daar by die huis gelos, jy gaan in elk geval nie gebruik nie. Maar ek voel die manne moet op hulle plek gesit word. Hulle kan openbaarlik sê net wat hulle wil.
En laastens, wat is julle plan vir die optog hier vandag?
Ons plan is om ons mense weer veilig op die pad te kry. Dis vir ons belangrik. Ek sien hulle een van ons manne met die klippe van die bike af gegooi. Ons voel ons het ons ding gedoen. Ons het ons gesê, ons het ons ding gedoen. So ek voel net dit is belangrik.
Ja, baie dankie man, ek waardeer dit uit. Okay, so just briefly, the translation is that basically they're not here for a fight, they're not here for black and white, but they can't explain why some of them have chosen to arrive here with their weapons. Some of them would be brandishing weapons. As you can see, if you focus on some of the protesters here, some of these guys are farmers, where others are just supporters of the farmers, and they have a designated area which is about 1 kilometer away from here. That's where AfriForum is staging its event, which includes addresses by different farming communities. But these guys have come down from that event to make a statement that they are here and that they're here to protest against farm murders. Their presence is certainly antagonizing the situation further, but it does seem as if there's adequate police presence here.
All right, Govan, let's talk a little bit, as you mentioned, weapons. Earlier on, you were tweeting about the seizure of those weapons, what with the heightened security as well as the presence in the area of the top brass in as far as the security cluster is concerned. The Minister of Police is also there. What can you tell us about the seizure of these weapons?
Yeah, so this has been happening on the routes leading into Senekal from multiple directions. And what we've seen is when we passed through the roadblock is that everyone has been searched, their vehicles have been searched, and people who've been found with weapons, those weapons have been seized in cases where they have provided licenses. It appears that they have been given back to them, but at this point we understand that there haven't been any charges laid against the people who had their weapons seized at the different roadblocks leading into Senekal. And it's not clear at this point whether the police had confiscated those weapons entirely or had taken all the weapons that they had found on the different roadblocks. Clearly not. If you look behind us, you could see that some of these farmers already have their weapons at their side in their holsters. So we're awaiting further confirmation from the police about, firstly, what exactly the roadblocks were meant to do, and then secondly, whether any of those people who had their weapons seized will be charged and what kind of charges they would be facing. Of course, the presence of the weapons here in Senekal on such a day when tensions are really high only further raises tensions, and the police minister had asked the farmers, the farming community, not to bring their weapons here. Some of them, of course, haven't listened to them, but it's important to point out that the communities in this area that are protesting aren't necessarily organized by one structure. So the person that we had just spoken to doesn't belong to the Farmers Union, and so the meeting that was held between Bheki Cele and the Farmers Union didn't really reach his people or the people that are with him here at the protest. From what we understand, these people here are from what is called the Boere Legion, led by one Isak van Sail, and they're completely separate from AfriForum or Solidariteit or Freedom Front Plus.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is the emergence here of different groupings, and it's not easy to tell who's in charge and who they would listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. Govind, in fact, while you mentioned that, let's color in some of the context to it. The reason we're talking about weapons, of course, is sort of going back to that incident when there were those protesters who stormed that particular magistrates court and were demanding that the two suspects who have been arrested in connection with the killing of Brandon Horner, the farm manager, be released to them as a community. I once presumes that they wanted to mete out, I won't call it mob justice because there's only one form of justice. There isn't an alternative form of justice, but it was going to be vigilantism that they wanted to engage in, and those people were said to be armed at the time at which those incidents happened. And part of the explanation from the police why they did not intervene vigorously and decisively on that day, police saying that they were exercising restraint because there would have been a loss of life had they decided that they were going to use force in reaction to that particular incident. So just coloring in some of the context there. But Govind, it's easy to forget while we're watching all of this commotion outside that the reason for today is the court appearance of these two men, Sekwetje Isaiah Mahlamba and Sekola Piet Matlaletsa. What's happened in court? What's happening with that particular process?
Yes, I've just come out of court actually, and the court proceedings started with an application by the press to have those proceedings broadcast live. That was allowed in part. The magistrate had ruled that they would only allow closing arguments and the judgment in the bail application to be broadcast live, but they will allow the press to be inside the venue to take visuals during the adjournments, and he is allowing reporting on the details of the case. But the state had opposed the application by the press to have that broadcast on the grounds that it says there are bits of information that are quite sensitive at this stage, and if those had to be broadcast live, it could affect or influence the way the police conducts the investigation and how the case is prosecuted. So that's how that compromise was reached. At the moment, the bail application is going ahead, Tulasis, where we moved out of that space to bring you some of this coverage here, but we do understand that both the accused will be going ahead with their application for bail. They both have their legal representatives here, and we understand that the applicants will be testifying and will be placed under cross-examination during their bail application. So that is what we're expecting to happen in court. It's unclear if that will wrap up today, but things are only kicking off right now in the Magistrates Court in Senekal.
All right, Govind, talk to us a little bit about the gathering of EFF protesters, and perhaps you could even move a bit closer and just show us a bit of that. What's the number of people that you are seeing in front of you? And I understand that the leadership of the EFF also amongst them.
Yeah, Julius Malema sitting in court. Floyd Shivambu is here. So is Marshal Dlamini, the Secretary General of the EFF. And it's not easy to give a complete picture of how many people there are here, but by estimation, there are approximately 7 buses which could seat 60 people each. Then we also have a number of EFF members from not only Senekal but Paul Rue and the Bethlehem area and the Marquardt area. The EFF is a party that does have some popularity in this area. So we could say that there may be close to about 500 people here, and there are reports that more are on their way. As for the leadership, they're expected to address the EFF supporters shortly after the bail application concludes. And we saw a tweet by Julius Malema. Actually, he was typing it while he was in court, which said, it was a quote from Peter Mokaba, which said, "It's better to die as a man than to let the enemy pass. Let's go." And I think that is, again, Julius Malema using his Twitter to instruct some of his supporters, but that gives a clear signal of the mindset right now, and also the atmosphere here in Senekal. So I did try to speak to some of these EFF supporters and ask them if they could do interviews. They're not keen on it at all. Many of them saying that they would rather have the leadership speaking. But it does seem like we have one person here who is a resident who would like to say something. So sorry, just step back a little. We're still under the lockdown and coronavirus. So are you a member of the EFF?
Yeah, I'm a member of the EFF and I'm a politician.
Which branch of the EFF do you belong to and where do you come from?
Okay, I'm come from Kutarichaba, Ward 60. And by my name, Bheki Cele Mahlamba.
Okay, so you arrived here this morning with the EFF?
Yes, of course, man.
All right, tell me why you decided to take this trip.
Because I just wanted to see how does my leader, Mr. Julius Malema, do for our community. Yeah.
Okay, do you have any views on the protest that was done by the farmers 2 weeks ago?
No, I do not have, but I have heard about it.
Okay, yes. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much. It will be difficult to get commentary at this stage, but we will keep trying. And of course, we want to hear from the leadership of the EFF. Things are still tense right now, but it looks like more police are coming.
Govan, before I let you go, I do want to release you so you can get back and hear the arguments inside court. But I'm just struck by the contradictions in that particular town, how it's all playing out. Part of the story has been these prayer meetings and prayer sessions by sections of the community that are deciding, let's pray for our community. That's the one thing that's happening. But at the same time, there's growing concern about groupings that are sort of presenting themselves as self-defense groupings. I mean, I saw visuals earlier on of a group that was wearing, I think, khakis or, dark brown uniforms with green berets. And there's been this narrative of concern about armed groupings and groupings that are styling themselves as self-defense groupings across the board. Contradictions, Govan.
Yeah, very contradictory environment here. The guys that were praying, they're mostly farmers. And the reason they were able to get to the point of deciding to withdraw from any plan to protest was because of Bheki Cele, the police minister's intervention with the state security minister. When he had met them on Tuesday, his engagement with the farmers' unions had won over a lot of favor, and the farmers' unions have significant influence in the immediate surroundings of Senekal, Paul Rue, and Bethlehem. And in response to Bheki Cele undertaking to not only investigate police involvement in stock theft, they decided to conduct the prayer, but also decided that they wouldn't be taking part in the protest. And with regard to the self-defense units and the group of people who showed up here wearing the old browns of the South African Defence Force, really a signal that antagonized a lot of people. That is part of a different grouping which we believe is linked to the Boere Legion led by Isak van Zyl, but they aren't necessarily under the farmers' unions, and it goes to the divisions that I had been speaking about earlier. As for the self-defense units, we have different kinds of organizations emerging to offer self-defense courses to the farmers, the likes of Color Combat, of Cobra, of Fortis, but then the farmers' unions themselves who are offering self-defense training on the farms to the farmers and their family members without a necessarily strategic agenda of using the training. And Whether or not the other groups that are offering this training have a nefarious agenda is unclear. We at ENCA have revealed that the SSA has decided to look at this more closely, and it is also uncertain to what end the training is being conducted. So you can see there's a lot of tension here. Let me just hear what this guy has to say to listen.
Thank you, my brother. Want to ask me a question?
Okay, I'm sorry about that, Tulasizwe. Obviously, you know, the environment here is very fluid, and a lot of people aren't necessarily here to comment on what's happening, but they want to make their voices heard.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Govan Whittles continues to watch the bail application inside court of those two men, Sekwetje Isaiah Mahlamba and Sekola Piet Matlaletsa, who are appearing in court in connection with the killing of Brendan Horner. And Govan, they're telling us that there's been a partial granting of the request by the media to actually carry those proceedings live, in that the magistrate has decided that the closing arguments in the bail application as well as the ruling in that bail application can be carried live.